Hey, everybody, welcome back to an episode of Relationship Wednesday. Of course, we deal with relationship management and really talking about it from the aspect of after I did, meaning that our goal is to help people have tools to recover after relationship setbacks and situations and stuff like that. So that's the main purpose of our podcast, and to give perspective, because one thing I've learned is that one of the ways we pick up the pieces is having the right perspective and the right way of looking at things through God's eyes to be able to recover from relationships. So just going to recap a little bit. And so we talked about the difference between covenant and contract relationships. And so we entered, had my wonderful wife, co-partnered with me to, unpack that a little bit. And so I just want to recap that a little bit, and then we'll move on to a couple of other things. So the main thing just really wanted to recap on is the fact that covenant relationships are more of a heart thing. Contract is more of a business or a works thing. And there's nothing wrong with either one. The main point of reason why I wanted to make sure we talk about it is that and for any relationship to move forward, communication has to be key. Good communication is key. But the problem is, if we don't understand the context of the relationship, it's hard to have the right communication in the relationship. So if I think you are a friend in a covenant, then my expectations and what I'm expecting out of a relationship is different than somebody who is just there, who befriended as a job, meaning that I'm just a contract, I'm just in your life for a season. So there's certain things I'm expecting, but if you are not recognizing the context of the relationship, you can find yourself hurt and offended and bitter over just misdiagnosing the relationship. That's the reason why, there are bad people in the world. There are. However, in the context of relationships, a lot of times we don't deal with bad people, we deal with bad placement. And meaning that we know that there are certain people who have issues, but we think that they're the devil once their issues attack us. But the problem was we put them in a category where we allowed their issues to attack us, meaning that if you knew what type of people and who they are and you categorize it right, then you're not going to be upset. People are not animals, but it's like if you know there's a dog who's kind of mean and that has a tendency to bite people, then you're going to protect yourself. But if you're under the assumption that they're a nice dog and then they bite you, then you're a little taken back by it because your expectation of it was different. But if I already know this type of dog you are, the type of temperament that animal has, then I already know how to approach it a certain way. So meaning likewise, if I know what people are supposed to be in my life, and so because every behavior reflects the nature. So meaning that once you take on the title of a certain relationship, it's going to behave a certain way based on the nature of that relationship. It's like once you understand the nature of a thing, here's the principle. Once you understand the nature of a thing, then you'll never be disappointed, because disappointment is the child of false expectations. But where did I get the false expectation? Because I didn't rightly diagnose the nature of a thing. So meaning that if I know that, when I say nature, meaning that nature in people about our mindsets. Nature's traffic through mentalities and mindsets. In other words, once I have a mindset, if it's about me, I'm going to conduct relationships a certain way. But if I go into a relationship with the mindset about I want to serve others and add value, if that's my mindset, then I'm going to work relationships a different way. And once you understand the nature of how the attitudes people carry, then you're not so surprised at the way they may interact and what they want to get out of you and how they behave, because I'm no longer taken back by that. So, and that's the whole thing about contract and covenant relationships. We got to understand that if I'm in a covenant relationship, then I know that we're going to move a different way. But if I know we're friends and we're cool, but this is a contract relationship, I know it's going to move a different way. But the problem is, if you assume that a contract relationship is a covenant relationship, then you can find yourself being hurt when they actually live out the nature of the contract, because you're thinking it is covenant. Because covenant people are there for you, God, and it's a God thing. It's a grace, meaning that I can't like you can't make people be friends. Like it's just something that happens organically. So same thing with a covenant relationship. A covenant relationship happens organically. It's something after spending time, God mends the hearts of the people spiritually. It's like a spiritual connection to where God built that. And really, it can't be easily broken. I mean, usually it takes an act of God, something really catastrophic to break that, because that's something God brought together for the purpose of plans for each other and how God designed things. But contract relationships, they're in your life usually for a specific purpose, for a specific time, and specific season. And once the season is used up and people don't recognize it, usually people will do and say different things because the terms of the contract are over, or they didn't feel like it was lived up to. So they're not there for you. They were there for whatever that season was in your life. So, and the problem is that contract relationships can look like a covenant relationship when it's in the season. And that's why you got to be careful when that season is over. And because I've learned this about God in life. Seasons normally don't announce themselves. Sometimes you can get a feeling of it, of a season, or seasons are changing and this and that. Sometimes certain seasons change like quick at a drop of a dime, unexpected. I mean, seasons, for example, there'd be people where they got attacked in their body, and then it wasn't a quick heal, and so now they moved into a totally different season of how they had to move. Somebody may have lost their job and they couldn't find one right away. It's almost like you didn't expect it, but it's like as you're living every day, you wake up, you find yourself, oh wow, I'm in this all new season. And then you have people moving in and out of your life according to the different seasons that are expected, unexpected, and moving into, and you got to know how to navigate that. Why? Because if I can navigate my relationships well, I can navigate my purpose well. And that's the reason why we need to make sure we understand expectations and what they mean and how they work. Because I don't want to become bitter, because when you become bitter from breakdowns, it messes with my perceptions of how I'm seeing relationships. And so that's why I really notice for a lot of people, they get into like bad boyfriend girlfriend relationships, and I'm trying to tell you, there are people who are in it to take and get stuff from you. But we have to realize that those were people who were never supposed to be in that place in our relationship, and it's just that we didn't understand it at the time. So that's why we got to learn how to let it go, because what happens is, and I've seen it with so many people, is that when you had a bad habit of trusting the wrong people, then you pretty much come to a conclusion that I can't trust anybody. And then now, once I came to that conclusion, in most of those relationships were contract relationships that we try to operate on a covenant level. And so once meaning that the contract was over, meaning that because they didn't once they got what they wanted out of the relationship, then they end up throwing you away, doing something, it's all those type of things. And then you feel hurt and everything because you thought that they supposed to operate different, but that's where it really moves different. So I want to share this with you, a couple of scriptures here. It says, I can find it here. Proverbs 17:17. That should be easy to remember. Proverbs 17:17. It says, a friend loves at all times, and a brother is born for adversity. And one thing I love about Solomon, he be dropping them wisdom nuggets, especially about, relationships and stuff like that. And it says, a friend loveth at all times. What does that mean? A friend loveth at all times. So these are people who there be certain people that will enter to your life, and they'll always be your friend. Now, I think that we need to understand, what is a friend? Like, what does that mean? Like, how do we break down what a friend is? Is a friend somebody who's always there for you or whatever? But what's a real friend? Usually a real friend, number one, the number one criteria of having a real friend is iron sharpens iron, meaning that there shouldn't be inequity in the relationship. And so that means that If somebody's in your life and you're always helping them, they're not your friend. Not because friends have equal equity. Now, you may have friends you may have to help sometimes in a certain season. We understand that's fine. It's a seasonal thing. But we're talking about friends where people, you're always helping them. In other words, you're always in a position where you got to carry them. That's what I'm saying. So meaning that what happened was they were people you were assigned to help, but you made your help your friend. And so now, once they get on their feet, they may end up walking away from you because you made the help your friend. And so a friend loves at all times, but in order for that to happen, there has to be equity in the relationship. So meaning that usually it all have to be a amount. So it's just the mentality is the same. We process life a lot in the same way. We have a lot of commonalities to a lot of things. The life rhythms and what we can handle is the same, meaning that that's where we are friends, because we can carry and we can support one another. When I'm in a down season, you can carry me, but when you're in a down season, I can carry you. Like we can help and build one another, because it's iron sharpening iron. But if it's in a season where you really can't help me, but I'm the one always helping you, then really that's the help. That's not. But what happens is the people you're helping sometimes are good people. Like in other words, they don't mean bad. They're just people who that they enter your life. But if you don't decipher that, you can find yourself befriending people who you were called to help, and meaning that you thought you was in a covenant relationship with them because you helped them. And I'm sure you've heard people, man, I did this for you, I did this, and then you just turn around and do that to me. But what happened was it was never supposed to be a friend-to-friend relationship. It was supposed to be a relationship by where I was in your life for this season to help you. Once the help was over, then therefore the friendship or the connection we had may dissolve because the purpose of that relationship is completed. But what happens is we don't know how to exit relationships well. So it comes, and this is what I learned. When God told Abraham to leave his family, and Lot went with him, which was his nephew, and because he stayed too long and he knew he's supposed to separate from his nephew, God said he took his hand off the relationship, and he said there was strife that entered the camp. So in other words, he let an offense rise up to be able to let them finally, for God's plan and purpose, to go his way. So sometimes their relationships, sometimes that God says it ran its course and you're trying to hold on to it too long. So therefore what God would do is he'll allow the offenses to show up to actually allow the relationship to run its course. So, but then there are other relationships where that's why you got to discern the difference, because there are certain relationships where the offense showed up not to dissolve the relationship, but the enemy knew it's a godly connection. So let me separate you from the godly relationship that you have. It was like with Peter. Jesus told Peter, he said, listen, tonight you're going to deny me 3 times, this and that, whatever. He said, but I understand that this is just the enemy's way of trying to separate us. I'm just paraphrasing, but but his point said, but when you restore it, go and restore your brothers. So Jesus understood Peter had a bad day, but Judas had a bad heart. So what does that mean? Judas was a guy where he came into the relationship, the friendship with Jesus, and as a brother, and he was there for the season. Once the season was used up, what happened? He betrayed him because the season ran its course. And actually, the betrayal, God used that to fulfill the purpose and plan. So sometimes we can't even get all upset about people who turn on us, not understanding that sometimes God will use those people to propel you into your purpose. But what did Jesus do? He understood, so he didn't stay in the fence on that. But Peter, Jesus said, Peter, I know that you got my back, but tonight you're going to, disown me like I never knew you. But he said, that's all right. I know your heart, and I know what the enemy wants of you from this. He said, but I want to let you know the enemy is not going to tear us apart because you had a weak moment. And that's the difference. See, Jesus understood the difference between Peter's heart and Judas's heart. They both betrayed him, but they both had a different outcome because of the posture of the heart. And so Peter betrayed Jesus, but it was a moment where the enemy was trying to tear the relationship apart. But where Judas, he betrayed Jesus, that's because his season was used up, and God used it to propel Jesus to a new season. And so you got to know how to discern the difference. Why? So you don't get bitter. What did Jesus say? Forgive them for they know not what they do. What's the point of even knowing all this? So I don't get bitter when these relationship things are happening, because if we live long enough, we're all going to either be betrayed by people that's supposed to be in our life, and sometimes be betrayed by people who's supposed to exit our life. But betrayals are going to happen. Offenses are going to happen. If it happened to Jesus, who are we to where it won't happen to us? So, but the difference is, because we get caught up in the action and what they did and how, and I know when we give our heart and we invest in people, we care and all those. And yes, there's a place to process our emotions and all those type of things, but we can't even begin to process our emotions if I'm already not having the right attitude or the godly perspective about the betrayal. So look what Jesus said: Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. So what do you mean they know not what they do? When, if you read the scriptures, Judas clearly knew what he was doing. I mean, he wouldn't have meetings with the people who were planning on betraying, and the people who planned on putting Jesus on the cross, they had meetings on how they were going to figure out how to kill the guy. And Jesus said, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Clearly, he had a heavenly perspective on, not an earthly perspective. Because if you look from the earthly perspective, you like, they knew exactly what they were doing. I mean, they had meetings. What do you mean they didn't know what they were doing? You don't just, like people say, you don't just slip and fall into sin. So whereas they didn't just slip and fall into just this whole thing. Like, oh yeah, no, they clearly knew, but Jesus understood that this was about purpose. This was about me walking in what God called me to have and God called me to do. And these people were part of the process of that journey. So basically, he realized that I'm forgiving them because I understand purpose was connected to their behavior. And you have to understand that, being betrayed don't feel good. Being talked about don't feel good. It doesn't. It hurts sometimes, and it can sting. Sometimes certain ones can sting more than others. But the thing is, I can't heal right if I'm assuming or looking at it through a natural lens. So that's why we're really talking about understanding covenant versus contract relationships. Not to say what they did is okay, it's so I can process what's going on from a godly point of view, so that way I can begin to say, you know what, I'm not going to allow these situations to impact the godly relationships that God has for me moving forward. So I'm going to hit the pause button there. That's my time for today. And we'll finish unpacking this next week. So God bless everybody, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you for joining Pastor Wayne Powell Sr. for this edition of Relationship Wednesday. We hope you enjoyed this episode of After I Did. Let's keep the conversation going by leaving your questions and comments in the chat. We also invite you to like, share, and subscribe to this channel. And don't forget to click the notification bell so you are reminded to join us next Wednesday as Pastor Wayne continues this discussion of After I Did.